Hi, so we're here with Caroline Clark today to have a talk about neutering, in particular the behavioural aspects of it. So Caroline Clark, a lot of you might have come across already, but she's a qualified clinical animal behaviourist, specialising in companion animals. She's also been a vet nurse for more than 40 years and has a wealth of experience and knowledge about all of this area. So she's a fabulous person to talk to about behaviour and neutering. So Caroline, I was really wanting to start talking about male dogs to start with, and really if there's any kind of behavioural benefits of neutering a male dog at all.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, first of all, and that lovely introduction. It's great to be here and chat about something that a lot of people got lots of questions about. So yeah, neutering male dogs. I think the first thing to say about neutering and any dog, but we'll stick with the male dog initially, is that lots of people will get a dog. They're quite exuberant, perhaps, jumping up, and some of the sort of behavioural things that can be a bit annoying for people, and they want to calm the dog down. And the perception is that neutering is going to put a stop to all of those behaviours. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Usually, we talk about neutering dogs for the benefit behaviourally if the dog is roaming after bitches, if they're losing concentration, perhaps they're a working dog and they're working with bitches that are in tire, and that's kind of interfering with the concentration. If they're mounting, and of course mounting isn't always testosterone driven, there are other behavioural reasons for that, but if they're mounting because they've got the scent of a bitch and they're kind of the type of dog that wants to run off after the bitches, and they get a scent of it, and that can kind of trigger that behaviour. And so, cocking the leg all over the place, those are the type of testosterone-driven behaviours that might be quelled with castration. But of course, some of the behavioural aspects, a dog that's maybe jumping up, as I said earlier, a dog that's perhaps behaviourally barking at other dogs, those kind of things. People will sometimes say, well, it'll quieten them down if we have them castrated, and it may not, because behaviourally it may be driven by something else. So often it's better to think about training, managing those behaviours, early training really important, and thinking about that first of all, because if purely, people are purely thinking about castration because it's going to quieten them down, full stop, then that might not be the case. So yeah, neutering a male dog, there are some benefits to doing that, but from a behavioural point of view, it's wrong to kind of think that it's going to solve all the behavioural problems that there are, because it won't, or it's highly unlikely to, other than those things I've pointed out.
So really it's kind of the sexual behaviour aspect of things then, rather than rest of behaviour.
Those testosterone driven behaviours. I mean, some dogs that are dog aggressive, which is a really common behaviour problem that people will get in touch with me about. If that target is just male dogs, if all they want to do is kind of show aggression towards other male entire dogs, then possibly that's a reason that we might say, well, okay, it's potentially testosterone driven, but I'd take a full history and look at all the other behaviours before we made that assumption, because of course there's a learning element. So if a dog has been frightened, or there's been a bit of a scuffle with another male dog, it may be a learned association, but that's we would have to kind of explore it, and it's always good to have a behavioural assessment before you kind of make that leap to castration, because once you've castrated, of course there's no coming back from that. But we probably will talk about using the implant that mimics castration. We can chat about that as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something we can always trial in dogs to see how they respond before we do a permanent castration surgically, because that does wear off with time, and that's a really good thing for us to consider.
Yeah.
I suppose on that route, is there any reason that behaviourally we shouldn't neuter a male dog? You know, is there a reason not to go ahead and do it?
There are, and particularly for dogs that are showing fear-related behaviours. And I emphasise that fear can manifest in a dog that looks aggressive, fear aggression. So sometimes a dog will become dog aggressive towards another dog or towards unfamiliar people. And that might not be just kind of aggression, is just really a behavioural response very often to fear. So fear-related behaviours, which might be a kind of outward show of aggression, it would be very important not to castrate, because testosterone gives a dog confidence, and if we remove that hormone, then that dog, it may be the only thing that's holding this fearful dog together. And because fear can manifest in aggression, we might be actually causing this dog to show more aggressive behaviours because of the fear. So it would be inadvisable to castrate a dog that's showing behaviours that are driven by fear. And again, a behavioural assessment or coming in to speak to you at length in the consultation might kind of allow you to make those assessments, or maybe refer them to see a behaviourist to get that more detailed history to see if it is related to fear. But it would be inadvisable to go ahead and castrate a dog that's showing any fear-related behaviours, because, as I say, testosterone might be in that case a good thing for that dog to have on board. Now, that doesn't mean to say that if, say, for example, this dog has got some medical reason why it should be castrated, it doesn't mean to say that this dog can never ever be castrated, but it might be that we need to undertake some behavioural work, training, management techniques, work on a plan to get that dog to feel better, and then maybe later on that can be done if needed. But certainly to go ahead would be the inadvisable thing to do. And of course, again, coming back to the implant that you can advise the client about, there is this implant that allows us to see whether or not this dog's behaviour worsens, because the implant gives us an idea of what surgical castration would look like behaviourally, and then would kind of give us the idea of we would be able to assess the dog, how it would react if it were castrated. But that's something else that you have in the veterinary armoury to help with that.
Yes, absolutely. Does the same apply to anxiety as well then? So would be an anxious dog be one to be cautious with?
Most definitely. Yeah, definitely male and female. So kind of staying with the male dogs at the moment, and certainly male dogs because of the testosterone. Obviously females, we're not kind of looking at the same kind of hormones. But yes, testosterone will be helping an anxious dog. So any fear-related, anxiety-related behaviours that a male dog has, it would be very important for the client to make sure that they chat to you before they book the dog in for castration. So yes, definitely anxiety and fear, both kind of on that spectrum, same spectrum. Stress-related behaviours, it's always best to get it checked out first behaviourally before just going ahead with the castration, because we might be making things worse.
Okay, that's really good to know. So is there an ideal time then when it comes to neutering male dogs that would be good to do, or females as well, I suppose?
Well, females, we can maybe chat about females, because we know about testosterone, and we know about it being this hormone of confidence, and sometimes that can be detrimental behaviourally, and sometimes it can be positive behaviourally depending on the individual. But just talking generally now about females and males, there is quite a lot of evidence pointing us to the fact that we should be really waiting for those dogs to become a little bit more mature. We shouldn't really be ideally neutering whilst that dog is in that kind of youth, that adolescent phase. We want to wait till after adolescence, ideally, because there's a lot of development going on skeletally, and obviously that's your kind of department. We want that dog to be skeletally, optimally developed, but mentally as well. There's a lot of kind of mental changes, neural changes going on. And if we do spay or neuter a male dog too early when they're young, then that can behaviourally be a bit unsettling, especially in a dog that's anxious, whether it's male or female, especially. So what we normally say is wait till that adolescent period is over, particularly in our anxious dogs. And that, again, it's very difficult to give blanket advice because each dog is an individual. Thinking about adolescence, some dogs reach adolescence, depending on the breed and the size, reach adolescence earlier or later, depending on the breed. So that's something else to bear in mind. But we really want to make sure that, particularly for any dog that's anxious, that we work on that behaviour before we spay on, or castrate them. So it's always better for the client to make sure that they chat to you about the dog's behaviour as part of their reasoning to have the dog neutered, and mention it. It's really important to just mention it to you so that you can give them the best advice.
Well, that ties in quite nicely, to be honest, because now we do very much focus on getting to, as you say, skeletal maturity for the majority of dogs, and that is post-puberty. So that ties in nicely as well with the physical age for best neutering, as well as the behavioural aspect. So that makes life nice and easy, at least. That's good.
That is.
We should probably talk about female dogs a bit more then, really, shouldn't we? So is there any evidence that neutering female dogs affects their behaviour?
There's a little bit of evidence, and it's not really very robust because, as I was saying earlier, there's so many reasons why a dog might begin to show anxiety, and we can kind of, when we look at scientific evidence, we have to take it into account all of the different variables. But there is some evidence that neutering bitches too early can induce anxiety. But of course, that might be because of lots of other reasons. But I think if we give that general advice that let's spay a little bit later, then it kind of takes into account this evidence that's out there that suggests that early spaying can affect behaviour. And there is a little bit of evidence to say that spaying might make a dog more anxious, but we think that's because this dog probably had got the capacity to be anxious anyway. And of course, it's such a common behavioural problem that I deal with. It's affects a lot of dogs' anxiety, fear. So it's something that is out there anyway, and sometimes we kind of jump to conclusions about why is that, and if a dog's been spayed, then it might be kind of thought that that's the reason why, and it may not be. Experience, as I say, genetics and all of those other things. But yes, there is a little bit of evidence, but particularly in young dogs, if they were spayed at too young an age. So if you're giving the advice to kind of spay a little bit later, then we should kind of take that into account. But just like the male dogs, just to emphasise that if a dog, any sex, is a little bit anxious, stressy, fearful, then it's always better to get that behavioural assessment, chat to you about it, delay. And the other thing to mention is, and I know how behaviourally aware Aldgate are as a practice, but the actual act of coming in to be neutered, to be spayed, is actually quite fear-inducing. It's a stressful environment. Most dogs don't like coming to the vets. So it's really great to have a chat with you about that anyway, because, if you decide that it is the right thing to have the dog neutered, but the dog is a little bit anxious, then you can give some really great advice about maybe doing some pre-appointment check-ins with the receptionist so they can give them a treat and get them used to coming in at quiet times, maybe pre-appointment medication to help them be less stressed and calm when they're coming into the practice. And so that's really important too, having that kind of awareness about how fearful a dog is about coming into the practice. And I'm sure you can give some really great advice about that.
Absolutely, and if we know that people are concerned about their dogs beforehand, we can absolutely do things to reduce the anxiety and the stress levels of everyone, because it's an anxious time for the owners as well. So if we can make everyone feel a bit more confident and make the day go smoother, and then hopefully future visits are easier and happier as well. So we're always keen to look at ways we can make the vet's visit less stressful and happier all around. So yes, absolutely, talk to us and we can do some things to help with that.
That's quite big. I know we're talking about dogs today, but that's really, really important for cats, because cats obviously, I know from experience, you know, they can really find visits outside of the familiar environment really frightening. So, and I know you can do the same for cats. So just to kind of pop that in there, because they tend to either scarp when they see the carrier or really find it quite stressful when they're actually being transported to the practice. So yeah, and I know that you can help the cats as well as the dogs.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll leave cats for today.
Yeah, for another day. We can talk about cats another day.
Absolutely. But is there anything else you think then we should know about neutering and behaviour?
Yeah, I just want to kind of touch on bitches that have had false pregnancies. So sometimes a bitch will have a false pregnancy and the client will want the bitch spaying. But it's really important with false pregnancies that we don't neuter her when she's actually in a false pregnancy. Now, sometimes that's when there's presence of milk, and I know pre-surgically you'll be checking those dogs over, but sometimes it's behavioural signs that we need to rely on the client to talk to us about in the practice, because it's not just milk in the glands that gives us clues whether or not our dog is still in a false pregnancy. It's her behaviour. It might be that they're a little bit more anxious. It might be that they're a bit more clingy. It might be that they're favouring a toy and maybe not wanting you to get hold of that toy, a little bit more resource guarding over a toy, because in a kind of psychologically they think it's a puppy. It may be that they're making a bed more. So it's really important that our clients are able to kind of talk to you about those behavioural changes at home, not just the physical outward changes that you're checking for, because we don't want to spay a bitch when she's in a false pregnancy, because we can be almost locking her in to a false pregnancy behaviourally. So we want to make sure that she's well out of that false pregnancy, and that can be a matter of time. And usually we will say with kind of the spaying time on that, and this is something that you can obviously advise clients about, but usually we want to be at least 3.5, 4 months after the season has ended, and maybe even beyond that. But if we've got a bitch that is kind of in false pregnancy and we're kind of waiting and she doesn't seem to be coming out of it, there are drugs that will help bring them out of false pregnancy, and you'll be able to chat to the client about that.
Absolutely, and we can definitely give medications if needed. As you say, most come out by themselves, don't they? Particularly if we don't allow them to do too much of the nesting behaviour and things that reinforces the simple signs.
Yeah.
But some do need that medication. Absolutely, we can do that.
Yeah.
And to be fully out post medication and be confident that's resolved before we go ahead, and that for some dogs does mean looking at delaying things much closer to kind of 5 months potentially, depending on length of season. And
much better to delay and wait to make sure that the bitches out of a false pregnancy. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, one of the things that can perpetuate milk is if a bitch is licking a lot in her mammary gland area, because obviously licking is inducing milk to keep coming through. So there are some things that can maybe kind of perpetuate the outward signs. However, it's always better to err on the side of caution and make sure that our bitch is fully out hormonally, what we call hormonally neutral, before we
Yeah.
spay them. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
No, that's really
But
helpful.
yes, I mean, there's quite a few things to think about, and it's always a good idea to spend time chatting to you about, about why you might be wanting to have a dog neutered, what your reasons are, because then you can chat about that and allay some of the kind of misinformation that's out there, and chat about optimal times. Behavioral things that we can do behaviorally to help a dog before we book them in. But yeah, there are quite a lot of things involved in the neutering decision, and that's really important that time is taken to kind of get it right.
Yeah, well, that's really good. That's been really, really helpful, Caroline. And hopefully that will help people make these decisions about the best way forward with neutering and their pets.
Yeah, hopefully so. And it's been great to be able to chat to you. Thank you for inviting me today.
Not a problem. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Bye.